Hello and welcome, WestWorld fans. I haven't seen anything remotely as interesting as Westworld since The Matrix came out, and I've had some thoughts about it, and I thought it might be interesting to share it with the world and see what you guys might think. Now, before I begin, the obvious disclaimers obviously need to be applied. I'm just an amateur opinion on the internet. I'm not an expert on anything that I'm about to talk about, so caveat emptor. Don't do this at home. On the surface, Westworld is about the relationship between us, humanity, and the first robots, the first artificial intelligence that we're going to create, and hopefully in the not too distant future. It starts off fairly bloody and kind of violent, which is kind of to be expected from Hollywood these days. And just as a side note, whenever I watch something like this on TV, a show with the gratuitous level of violence that we're seeing coming out of Hollywood nowadays, I basically kind of ignore it. It goes right over my head. I watch it and I go, yeah, a whole lot of ketchup sauce being splattered all over the place and all over the walls and stuff. And I basically ignore that stuff and I tend to think about the background thinking and the background philosophy of what's happening in the show. Now, I understand that for some viewers, this is going to be hard to take, and they might dismiss Westworld out of hand just because of this, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm just giving you my experience of it. Like, I'm not. Some people are probably interested in the mayhem that's going on in the show, and for each his own. But that's not really what I'm attracted. That's not what attracts me about the show. So I think we should start by defining a couple of terms or thinking about artificial intelligence a little bit. I'm paraphrasing here, and obviously these are my definitions that I think would be useful for purposes of this discussion, but they may not. Please don't take them literally. But there are a couple of definitions rolling around the field of artificial intelligence, and the first one would be the concept of weak artificial intelligence, weak AI, or narrow AI. These would be things like, for example, Siri on your phone, or Watson, or Deep Blue, the computer that beat the first computer to beat the human world chess champion. I mean, these are computers that have an extensive knowledge database, and they can interact with the world in a fairly limited way. They can understand sort of a question that's phrased in their language. They can do the necessary calculation and come up with the right answer. Another example would be self-driving cars and trucks and things of that nature. The second type of artificial intelligence is what's called strong AI, or artificial general intelligence. And one of the criteria that people have for this is an intelligence that can use the knowledge that it's been given, it's been programmed from the get-go, and it can apply that to other areas. For example, a computer that could basically be programmed to drive a Tesla car, for example. Imagine an Android that can drive that car, and they can just one day can get out of it and jump into a Ford and drive off with no problems. For us, it's very easy. Once you learn how to drive a car, pretty much every other car kind of tends to work more or less the same way, the same rules, the same traffic rules. The switches might be in different places, but that's not essential to the operation of the car. Well, a strong AI would be one that could do that, for starters. But I think, at least for purposes of this discussion, we need to take it a little bit further and say strong AI has to be more than that. It has to be, at times, in a significant portion of the time, it has to be indistinguishable from us. Like even they say in Westworld, when the William character walks in Westworld the first time and meets the first host, and he asks, "Are you real?" And then the host says, "Well, if you cannot tell, does it matter?" I would argue that at some point it's a question that we need to examine, and we're going to do that in part 2. I haven't actually. I should have started probably by introducing the series. I'd like to talk about what Westworld is not about, at least in my understanding and my evaluation of it. In the first part, I'm going to talk about what Westworld is not about. In the second part, I'd like to talk about some of the philosophical themes running in through the show and some of the other interesting metaphors and interesting bits of philosophy sprinkled here and there, and that I think are pretty cool, interesting. And part number 1 and 2 are going to pave the way for the third part, in which I will talk about what Westworld really is about. It's going to be exciting. But please try to not skip 1 and 2, because without them, part 3 may not make as much sense as I would like it to. So, going back to the discussion of weak AI and strong AI, another differentiator is that basically weak AI doesn't understand what it knows. It doesn't understand what it is. It doesn't understand the answers that it's providing. It's simply input, mix it up with the knowledge base, output. It has none of these things have any meaning to it, and it doesn't care about them. And I think this is going to be a fundamental difference between strong AI and weak AI, is that strong AI has to have intrinsic motivation, and it has to want things. It has to do what it does because it wants to. It has to desire these things, and fundamentally, we're talking about emotions. If a computer is designed to want to do something, that is, the desire for something is an emotion, then I think for us to get to the point where we have an artificial intelligence, a robot, say, or an android, that is indistinguishable from ourselves, it would have to pretty much have emotions to some extent. That's one of the things. And the other one, it has to be self-aware or conscious, or it has to have, in other words, self-knowledge. And I think we can see this very clearly. And the show drops hints all the time that the hosts are becoming conscious all the time. But I think the key moment is when, obviously, if I haven't said this before, there's going to be some pretty major spoilers. So if you haven't actually watched the show, then buyer beware. So the key point, I think, when we can recognize that the hosts truly are far more than just automatons, than robots, is when Bernard talks to Dolores and he asks her analysis, what prompted this response from you? And Dolores kind of pauses a little bit and she says, I don't know. I don't know. The 3 hardest words to say in the English language. It is, for some people, go through their whole lives never being able to say, I don't know. There's so much that is behind these 3 little words. There's a fundamental honesty to oneself. Dolores is saying, there is something that is missing from my knowledge, from my programming, from what's inside my brain. Something is missing, first of all. There's also the recognition that is something that is important. There's something that is essential to know. Like the way she says, I don't know. It's clear that she's conscious that this is something that perhaps she ought to know. And it also expresses a desire to know the answer to that question. So I would also, there's also this theme going around that once we invent the first AI, then it's going to automatically, recursively self-improve. And whereas in a blink of an eye, we're going to get a singularity, an explosion of hyper-intelligent consciousness that's going to basically alter everything we know about the world, and is going to become the beginning of a new era for humanity. I have some doubts about that. Obviously, I'm no pro, but it seems to me that to come up with a level of intelligence that just matches our own is a massive undertaking. Just to create something that is as intelligent as we are is basically requiring the resources of the entire planet. I mean, not obviously not everybody's working on this, but some of the brightest minds in the world are working on this problem, and there's a whole lot of money being spent on it. And I don't believe we have even scratched much of the surface. So if it takes this much effort to get to the point where we have a being that's as intelligent as us, that doesn't necessarily mean that being is going to be automatically able to to create a copy of itself that is an order of magnitude smarter. Maybe we have to build, a few thousand, a few 10,000 of these hosts or androids or robots, and maybe through a concerted effort on their part, they will be able to create a super intelligent being, maybe. But I don't think it's going to be automatic. And I don't think it's going to happen overnight, as some people claim. Maybe I'm wrong, who knows, but I have some doubts about that. So let's talk a little bit about what the current paths are that people are embarking on this road to creating artificial intelligence. There's from my research on this, there's a couple of schools of thought. The first one is, well, we take a brain, the human brain, and we create an artificial version of it. Like every neuron that we have is going to be replaced by a computer chip or a transistor, and we're going to connect this one to every other neuron that is connected in the human brain. We're basically going to photocopy the human brain onto a giant silicon chip, and we're going to make all the connections, and voila, it's going to become a fully formed human being. There's some problems with this, I believe. The major one is something called the complexity break. I read about it in an essay by Paul Allen. And what he says is something to this effect. I mean, you can look it up on Google and find out for yourself. It's a very interesting essay. What I got from it is that the more we study a very complex problem like cognition, like the human brain, like any brain for that matter, the way the neurons work and the way they interconnect and they do the things they do, the more we study this, the more we discover even more complex behavior, even more complex aspects that we never thought were there. And it seems that the more progress we make, at least up until this point, the more progress we'll make, the more difficult the problem becomes. Something called it's a very apt name for it, the complexity break. So in other words, the more you make progress, the more it is difficult to keep making progress, and the more you realize that potentially there could be a lot further to go. In other words, that the rabbit hole would go pretty deep. And it's in the case of the human brain, it does appear that the rabbit hole goes quite deep. A very good example of this is that there's a very well studied worm called C. elegans or something like that. It's a tiny millimeter long transparent worm that has a brain that has 300 neurons, and it's extensively studied to the point where its brain has been completely mapped out. They know which bone is connected to which bone and which neuron is connected to what neuron and where all the synapses are. And it is very well known. The human brain, by contrast, is still unknown. We don't even know exactly how many neurons it has, never mind how many connections and what's connected to what and so on. So the reason why I bring this up is that there's a lot of research around this worm in trying to recreate it, basically. And they haven't been able to do it. It's complex enough that what they have accomplished so far is very limited, to put it this. They have created an artificial recreation of the worm that can apparently move, it can stop when it hits some kind of barrier, and can maybe turn back. It has an interaction with its outside world in a limited way. But the the amount that they have accomplished is so tiny. I mean, just mimicking the movement of this worm is probably not even 1% of what that worm actually can do. I mean, for example, does this recreation of the worm, does it feel cold? Does it have a reaction to being cold? Does it have neural receptors that tells it, hey, it's cold, maybe we should do something about it, or hot? Does this recreation get hungry? If it does get hungry, does it have any preference as to which kind of bacteria it's going to eat? Does it get, what about reproduction? How does that work? Does it get to make a choice? Does it, in a potential mate, does it go around and just find the first, mate that it can find and then do its thing? Or we don't know all of these things. None of these have been even attempted, as far as I know, as far as I can tell. I mean, I'm no expert in this, but I think we're pretty far from any kind of mimicking of another living being by means of just reconstructing its brain. So there's a school of thought that says, well, computer power is doubling every roughly 2 years, so it's inevitable that at some point we're going to have enough processing power to equal the human brain. But it seems that we don't even have enough processing power to emulate a worm with 300 neurons. We don't know what is the mapping going to be like. For example, is one transistor going to be equal to one neuron? How much processing power do you need to emulate the full depth of activities that one neuron can take? It's possible that you possibly might need a complete supercomputer to emulate the whole range of reactions that a neuron can have. I mean, neurons they're not like silicon chips. They don't, give it some electricity, it reacts always the same way. It always reacts a little bit differently. It reacts to different stimuli in a different way, maybe at different speed. There's a lot going on there. It's a lot more difficult than it would appear on first look. And the other thing we have to recognize is that human beings and pretty much all animals that do exist, they're not kind of snapped into existence in their present form. They're basically evolved. They are self-taught. They're born. The brain kind of develops from nothing, from the division of the egg and so on. And all of the neurons are there. And the connections inside are created by themselves. The neurons create connections between themselves, and some connections get stronger, some get weaker, some get dropped off completely. And it's a basic recursive self-improvement, a self-creation. So I don't think anybody has tackled that problem, and I don't think anybody has created a computer that can change its own wiring as it learns, as it evolves. So the second approach to developing artificial intelligence is just saying, well, look, we're going to take a supermassive computer, and the intelligence is all going to be in software. In other words, you can have a computer program that is matched to this computer, and it's sophisticated enough to emulate some kind of intelligent being. But again, you run into the same problem. This complexity break is that fundamentally we don't know what our own software does. We don't know how it does it. Fundamentally, we can see the effects of it. We can see we have cognition. We can speak. We can do things, but we don't fundamentally know how that works at a low enough level to recreate it artificially in software. In other words, if we wanted to create this C. elegans worm with the 300 neurons in the brain in a computer, in software, we probably can't even do that now. I mean, I haven't heard of anybody accomplishing this. So where am I getting with this is that the problem of artificial intelligence is much more difficult than we think. And we have really no way to gauge just how difficult it is. We have no way to gauge where we are on the progress on the way to getting there. We have no way to know. That's the only honest answer that we can give, is that when are we going to discover AI, or when are we going to create AI? Well, some people are saying 2050, 2045, 2090. The honest answer is we don't know, and we have no way to know. We don't know, just we don't know what's up ahead. It's like we're looking for a city and we have no idea. We have no maps. We don't know what the city looks like. We could be on top of the mountain. It could be at the bottom of the ocean. We don't know. So let's, for a second though, accept the premise of the show that this is all happening in roughly 2050. Like I said, it started in 2015, 2014, add 35 years to that to get roughly 2050. So let's assume that's true for a minute for the purposes of this conversation. Maybe it's a reasonable assumption. Let's say in 2050 we're going to have the first androids, the first artificial intelligences roaming around the Earth. So how would this come about? Let's imagine. So there's going to be a company out there that's working on this problem, and in 35 years' time, maybe they're going to come up with this solution. Maybe it's going to be more than one company. Who knows? But just imagine the following speech. Imagine the following, if you will. Let's take the CEO of Google, or let's take Elon Musk, right? He's into artificial intelligence. He's had some investments in it. Let's say he's the one whose company has managed to invent AI. Let's say he's the owner of Delos. So Elon Musk gets up in front of the board of directors. Elon Musk gets up in front of the board of directors, the Delos board of directors, and delivers the following speech. Welcome to this humanity's finest hour. Work that has started more than 2 millennia ago with the first thoughts of the ancient Greek philosophers, of Socrates, and it went on through the Middle Ages with Leonardo da Vinci and everybody who tried to learn about ourselves, to figure out what makes us tick, what fundamentally are we, how do we think, how do we ration. The incredible effort that humanity has put into this project for the last 2,000 years, like it's finally come to fruition. It is completely unbelievable if you think about it. This truly is humanity's finest hour. Remember how many thousands, tens of thousands of people invested their whole lives into this project. They got their PhDs. There are doctors, there are engineers, there are computer scientists, there are neurobiologists, and so many other incredibly smart, incredibly talented people who have invested into this problem to come to some fruition. And the amount of money that was invested in it is beyond belief. It's like I've lost count. It's probably over a few $1 billion. It's like humanity's one of humanity's greatest achievements. So ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dolores. So Dolores walks in, says hello, and Elon continues. Says, they kind of right now they're kind of expensive. Like they probably cost around $2 million each, and in time, after we build the first 1,000 or so, I think we should be able to get the price down to about half that, so maybe $1 million. So we're looking at probably another $2 billion invested in creating a few more of these wonderful, beautiful, intelligent beings. So. But yeah, I think it's a well-worthy investment. It's the crowning achievement of humanity. So, and I've got this great idea what we're gonna do with them. We're gonna build this park, and we're gonna use them for target practice, amateur vivisection, and all-night orgies, and just blow their brains up on the walls once in a while. Could you just imagine that? Can you just imagine somebody like that delivering this speech? I mean, no matter what you might think or may have heard or think about them, these are smart people whoever is going to create the first artificial intelligent being on this world is going to be a smart person. They're going to be in charge of an army of very, very smart people. These smart people who have invested, who have proven that they can make money, they can invest a lot of money and create a lot of value. They're not going to take these hosts, these androids, and put them in some amusement park for psychotic, crazy people. No. If anybody would propose that in front of a board of directors as to what to do with this achievement, I mean, can you just imagine? He would be just pumped full of horse tranquilizers and put in a soft room on the other side of Mars to eat potatoes for the rest of his life. You know, like, no. WestWorld is not what our first relationship with artificial intelligence is going to be like. The first AIs are going to be unique. They're going to be tremendously expensive. They're going to be tremendously capable. They're going, if they have volition, if they have free will, basically, or desire to do something, they're probably, hopefully, going to help us in something that is a lot more meaningful. They're not going to be just put in a park for psychos to shoot at them and do other things that we see in WestWorld. So no, that's not what WestWorld is all about, fortunately. But you know, in part 2, I will talk about some of the other philosophical aspects of the show that I think are very interesting and unique, and they're going to help us discover what WestWorld really is about, and I will do that in part 3. So thank you very much for watching. It's been a little bit longer than I planned, but thank you very much for your patience. If you like it, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in part 2.